That last one was just recently published. None of those others are published, unless you count being on the web as published. The last one is published in Libertarian Papers. So the business model that we have in mind is, we call it subscription control and restitution, and is inspired by the writings of Molinari, Rothbard, the Tannehills, and so forth. The idea is to create a full business model for internal security. In the current offering, it's a residential service, subscription-based, about a price point of $35 a month. Patrol, monthly newsletter on area crime, first responder, various concierge services while you're out watching, taking care of the pets, so forth. And then covering the crime cycle, as I show on the right-hand side, which would be if a crime occurs, to investigate it, to find the perpetrator, to engage in the mediation or binding arbitration, or failing that, to make restitution directly to the subscriber.
There's overflow seating for the Peter Schiff speech about to happen very soon. And we'll be watching on that television right there. We're up in the Massey Library right now. Looking forward to Peter Schiff speaking. Good evening, Libertarian Christians. Norman here, and I just wanted to wrap up the day for the second day of the Austrian Scholars Conference with just a little talking about what actually went on and some of the sessions that happened. So just as in summary, I'd like to just talk about a few of these things. First of all, first session that I attended was the one on monetary policy. Probably the most interesting paper that I heard there was from Walter Block and Bill Barnett from Loyola University on time deposits and the Austrian theory of the business cycle. One of the things that they explained in the paper is that the theory of the business cycle needs to be revised somewhat to consider the fact that really what goes on when the money supply is expanded is not simply that more money is in circulation, but there's a mismatching between between time periods of borrowing and lending. So when banks borrow short and lend long, there is a mismatch in how in how the credit markets are operating, and that is what actually creates the business cycle, not merely the inflation of the money supply, but it always comes through credit markets. And so that's an important point to be made. It was a very interesting presentation. Let's see, what else we have here. In the following panel on entrepreneurship, we heard a number of very interesting papers from Stuart Wood and Peter Klein and Chris Brown and Matthew McCaffrey on various topics on entrepreneurship in Austrian economics, and as in what is the function of the entrepreneur, or how does the entrepreneur actually work, according to Austrian economics. And so one of the neat things was just that I heard some really great stuff about how Richard Cantillon, who's a predecessor to Adam Smith, explained much of his theory of economics by talking about theory of entrepreneurship. So that was a very important point. I thought it was very interesting to hear what Chris had to say about that. Let's see, what else? We also had a section on security and foreign policy, and one of my friends, Gil Guillory from Houston, presented on his subscription control and restitution model. He's interested in starting a business that, in effect, is like private security for homes, and would, in effect, replace even police officers, and potentially. And it's so he's done some really interesting work and just talked about the marketing of that model in his for his paper, and you saw some of the footage of that already in this video. So let's see what else. had a fun session on topics in constitutional order with Roderick Long, Anthony Gregory, and Gerard Casey. Roderick Long talked about the American Revolution a little bit, and talked about how the conflict between Seabury and Hamilton and Price and Lind in his paper, and how a lot of the natural rights and that were being attacked and so on and so forth. Very interesting what he had to say. Anthony Gregory had a wonderful presentation on the history of habeas corpus, and just an absolutely phenomenal presentation, I thought, to where he talked about how, habeas corpus we often consider to be a really great thing, and that's true. But in effect, as it has become more centralized within the federal government, it actually has subverted its original purpose, or one of its original purposes was to be a check, or at least in America, the American colonies at least, it was a check upon basically the federal government being able to arrest people and hold them and detain them without charges. And now that has basically been appropriated by the federal government, primarily, that it actually is in great danger. So he had a lot of great things to say about that. And then Gerard Casey actually challenged the very concept of political representation, which I think is was a very good point to make. Talked about how that basically there is really no logical coherency to the concept of political representation. It's indefensible ultimately and has just basically no backing. And it goes back to the myth of democracy ultimately, in that most of us feel that representative democracy is somehow a good thing. But really, in effect, it isn't. I mean, of what value is it to have democracy when it's just basically two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner? There are other ways you can talk about that as well. Finally, we had a presentation, or the lecture by Peter Schiff, and if you were monitoring the website today and watching the live streaming, that was the only thing that was streamed today. So that was pretty exciting. It was very entertaining. Great quote from that, if I can pull it up here on my computer. He talked about how Bush used to say that Wall Street got drunk, but what Bush keeps failing to ask, and what Obama continues to not ask, is where did they get the alcohol? So in other words, the only way that Wall Street could even get drunk is if there is a government that is providing them with the means to get around what would be a market check otherwise. And so ultimately, as we know, the free market is not the responsible party for the economic crisis, but rather it is the result of government regulation. It's not over-regulation, it's actually what they regulated into existence, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Those are not market entities, but government-created enterprises that subvert the market force in some way. And in the case of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they would make support loans that otherwise the market would never have allowed to probably exist in the first place. And then they prop them up by refusing to let them fail. So we know that this is the real cause of the economic crisis, and so we have a lot of interesting things that we can go back to show that this is the case. And so Schiff talked a lot about that. So that's about it for today. Just to let you know, I'll be giving a presentation tomorrow, my talk on science and the free market. And unfortunately, I believe that you will not be able to watch that live online. So if you were looking forward to that, I'm terribly sorry, but I have received new information. That's not going to happen. But once I get the audio file, I'll definitely make sure and put it up. If you want the paper, just make sure you contact me via the contact page that you see up above you on the website. And well, hopefully you can check it out. And if you contact me, I'll send you the paper. You can check it out then. Otherwise, you'll be able to see it when I get the audio file. And with that, the end of the second day of Austrian Scholars Conference. Good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.